All right, so let's go ahead and talk about updating the invoice. So the updating invoice form is similar to the create an invoice form, except we'll need to pass the invoice ID to update the record in our database. So let's see how we can get and pass the invoice ID. So again, I'm going to explain the steps here. We are going to create a new dynamic route segment with the invoice ID. So it's going to be a dynamic route. We're going to read the invoice ID from the page params, fetch the specific invoice from our database, and then pre-populate the form with the invoice data. And then finally, we're going to update the invoice data in our database. So the first is creating a dynamic route segment with the invoice ID. So Next.js allows us to create dynamic route segments when we don't know the exact segment name and want to create routes based on data. So as you can see here, so far, I'm going to delete this because I'm not going to update the data here. So let's go and close all this. And as of right now, everything inside your app directory will be routed. So we have our dashboard, and inside our dashboard, we have our overview, customers, and invoices. Now this dashboard, or whatever route we want to create, the URL route will be mapped to the name that we created the folder with, the same name. So what if I don't know the name? I want to create a route that the name is actually going to be an ID, and that's going to be a dynamic ID. I don't know the ID beforehand. So Next.js allows us to create this dynamic route segment when we don't know the exact name. All right, so this could be anything, like let's say a blog post title that create that blog post based on that title or ID, right? We can create dynamic route segments by wrapping a folder's name in square brackets. So the way we tell Next.js that this is going to be a dynamic route is just simply we are going to put square brackets. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to go back to our dashboard inside invoices. And here in the invoice, we are going to create a folder. And here we're just going to open up square brackets. And here we are going to write ID. So that's ID portion of it is going to be the name, which is a dynamic. So square brackets lets Next.js know that this is a dynamic route. So inside the ID here, we are going to create, inside the ID here, we are actually going to create another nested route. And this nested route is actually going to be edit. And inside the edit, we are going to create our page.tsx. Okay, so here, let me just go ahead and export default function. And let's just return here something. Let's just return a p tag that's basically said that it's a dynamic route page. Okay, let's save this and let's go ahead to our application. I want to make sure that the server is running. It's not, so let me run the server and go back here in the application. We want to make sure that we go to invoices, which we are on this, and then here is going to be an ID, and this is dynamic. It's basically can be anything we want, and inside this we're going to have an edit. So if we do whatever, like whatever, and then edit, let's see. There you go. You see this whatever. It can literally be whatever. It can also be a number. And we're still treated with the page. So this is a dynamic route. It doesn't not really have a specific name. Okay, like invoices has a specific name because we mentioned it. We create the folder with the specific name of invoices. If I add another S to it and then enter, it's not going to work. It's going to say that the route does not exist. So let's go ahead. I want to go to our table. So this is the table that component that we created, right? So this table component, we have this component right here, which is update invoice. Okay. And this is actually a button that receives the invoice ID. Okay. Now let's go ahead and navigate to this update invoice. And we see that this is just a function which takes the ID. All right. And let's go ahead and update the href of the link to accept the ID prop that we are passing it here. And we can use template string for this one. So basically I am going to, so here, let's wrap this entire thing into curly braces. So it is a JavaScript, and change this double quotation to template string. And here outside of this invoices, we are now going to go ahead and grab, so we don't want whatever or anything like that, right? We actually want to get the ID of that URL. And then from here, we're just gonna go ahead and do edit, save. So this is the update invoice button that's coming from this table here. Okay, this table update invoice. So let's go back to our application. So this button is actually going to be this one right here. So let's go ahead and inspect that. This is an SVG, but this is the edit button, update button. So we want to update this invoice. So what does it do? So if I click on here, you see that it does go to, because we just changed this here, the href, it basically gets the ID. Its ID is embedded into our URL and then edit. So now if we want to do anything like SQL and connect with our database, we now have access to the ID, specific ID of that record that we want to edit. So let's go to our page.tsx, which is right here. And then we are now going to read the ID from the URL that we just passed in here. So I am going to copy. So let's go ahead and delete everything and copy paste this. So what's happening right here? So it is pretty similar to what create invoice page, except it imports a different type of form. So the edit form right here, right? So it's pretty much the same thing as create form, but it has an edit form. So if we click on here, we are going to see that there is, so it's not create form, but it's an edit form. Okay. Now this form should be pre-populated with a default value. Okay, that's what we want. That's why we wanted to create this new edit form that actually pre-populate with all the item, all the data, like customer ID, amount, all this pre-populated from the database, like customer name, invoice amount, and status, okay? To pre-populate the form fields, we need to fetch the specific invoice using the ID from the database. So in addition to search params, page components also accept a prop called params, which we can use to access the ID. So update our page component. So let's go back to our page component right here. And here, let's go ahead and get this. Let's do const ID. Let's just read the ID from the URL that we want to read. And we're just going to say params.id. Okay, now obviously where these params are coming from. These params are coming from because we want to pass this to this as a prop. It's going to be a type of params, which is going to have an object with a key of ID, which is going to be type of string. Save this. There you go. So the page, this component right here, is going to grab the params. It's going to add get a params as a prop, and we can destructure, or you can just get the ID from the params.id. Now, the next up, okay, so we first passed the ID and created a dynamic route, and then from the URL, we are reading the ID. Now, let's use that ID to fetch our data from the database. So we're going to import a new function called fetch invoice by ID. So let's go ahead and do this. This is also going to be from our data. So we're going to do fetch invoice by ID, okay? And we're going to look into that function in a bit. In fact, let's do that right now. There you go, fetch invoice by ID, which have an parameter argument that is ID. And we're just going to get this SQL invoice form, select invoice ID, customer ID from invoices where invoice ID is equal to ID. Simple as this. Okay, so just underneath here, ID equals params.id, we are going to create const. Let's restructure it into an array, and we're just going to say invoice and customers. It's going to come from await. We're going to use promise.all. We're going to do promise.all. And here, the first argument is going to be an array, and then we're going to do fetch invoice by ID, and we're going to pass the ID to it. We're also going to fetch our customers. Okay, so we are doing a couple of fetches, and we want to fetch everything together, which is promise.all here. Okay, we are getting the invoice from this one and the customers from this one. And fetch customers is already imported right here from our same lib data. So let's go ahead and test that everything is wired correctly. Okay, connect with it. So what we want to do is we're going to go to our application, and we're just going to simply go to our invoices. Okay, and we want to, let's go ahead and click on the pencil or edit for the record that we just created. So let's go ahead and do this. So this is a new invoice, and look at this. This is actually pre-populating with all the information from the database. So this one. So we can go back to our invoices again. And this one, let's see, Delwa, which is $89.45. Look at that, $89.45. So it's pre-populating, so that's great. And of course, you can take a look that the URL also has the ID. So now, finally, what we want to do is pass this ID to the server action so we can update the right record in our database. We cannot pass the ID as an argument like that. We cannot just do like form action. So let's go to the form. Here, we can't really do like action here, which will update invoice ID and then pass that ID into like this one. We can't do this. So let's see how you're gonna tackle this one according to that. So instead of doing that, we can pass ID to the server action using JavaScript bind. So this will ensure that any values passed to the server actions are encoded. So that's what we're going to do. That's good. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to go to the form itself. So let's go and edit form. Okay. Inside this edit form, make sure we are on the right place. API UI invoices edit form TSX. Okay. So here we are going to first import. Let's import it at the end here. We are going to import a function called update invoice. And that's the buttons. Actually, it's not this one. We want to get import update invoice from actions, but we haven't created that. So let's do this. Lib there's nothing there. So we're gonna go ahead and check this out. Here, what we wanna do is just underneath this customers, before we return something, we are going to create const update invoice with ID. Just create a new variable here. We're going to invoke that update invoice dot, and we're just going to bind this as null with invoice dot, it's going to be dot ID, like so. Okay, and then here we can return, and we can add the action here, which simply gonna call update invoice with ID. Okay, that's what we're gonna call. Instead of passing the ID directly to this function, we're going to utilize JavaScript bind. So we're gonna say update invoice with ID is gonna be update invoice, which is, we haven't created this function yet, so we are going to do that. So, but we're gonna call this function, bind this with null and invoice.id. Perfect. So let's go back to our actions here. These are the actions. We don't have anything that's called update invoice ID as of right now. So let's go ahead and do that. What we want to do is, first we want to create is a schema for this one. So we're going to say const update. We can actually do this here as well, like because we created this one, so we can create this one as well here. Update invoice is equal to going to be form schema. It's going to use the same exact schema. It's going to have a mit, and we're going to do exactly ID, which is going to be true. And then it's going to have the date, which is also going to be true. So same exact thing we're creating, but this is because this is going to be for update invoice, we're going to do it for update invoice. So let's go ahead and create the function now. So we're going to do export. This is going to be an async function. It's going to be an async function. We're going to call this update invoice, right? It's exactly what we called it. Actually, not updated. We're just going to say update invoice, right? Save it. And here we're going to say update invoice is going to take an ID, and that's going to be a type of string. And of course, it's going to take a form ID, which is going to be type of form data. So not form ID, but form data, which is going to be type of form data. And here we are going to do similar what we did here. So let's go ahead and just copy this and put this here. And instead of this, we're just going to use update invoice.parse. And we're doing the same thing. We're getting the customer ID, we're getting the amount, we're getting the status. Customer ID get customer ID, amount, and status is pretty much the same thing. We are also going to be utilizing this one. So command copy. Okay, amount in cents is amount times 100. And now we are going to await and write our SQL command. Let's do that. And here, what we want to do is we want to update the record. Update invoices, set the customer ID equal to, it's going to be, of course, our customer ID. Let's comma, amount is equal to going to be amount, and then comma status is gonna be status. Okay, where now this is the condition is ID is equals to, it matches the ID that we passed in. So save this. All right, so we are updating our SQL database. And then we're going to do the same exact thing. We are just going to copy these two lines and paste it here. Okay, to do that. So copy this, paste it here. Let's save it. So once we update this, we want to revalidate it again because we don't want to show the previous data. We want to show the new updated data. And then we are going to redirect to the dashboard invoices. Okay. All right. So it's pretty much the similar that we did with the create invoice, right? We are extracting form data. We are then validating with Zod, with this update invoice, and then we are converting the amount with the sense, running SQL, revalidate, redirect. Great. And so let's save this and let's go back. Okay, let's go ahead and fix that problem here. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to delete this and I'm going to have Visual Studio Code update this. Now let's go back to our application here. I'm going to go back to the invoice and 111. Let's go ahead and edit this one and make this 112. And let's make this paid and edit. Okay, so we are having a problem. Invalid input syntax for type integer. Okay, cool. Let's go to this. And we know where it's coming from. It's actually coming from this area right here. So what did we do? That's the one that I'm missing here. Instead of amount, it's actually going to be amount in cents because we are saving all the amount into database with the amount in cents. So, okay, so let's go ahead, refresh again. Let's go back to my invoice here right now and then do it again. Edit 12 and pending. Click. All right, there you go. It's updated correctly now, 112.99. And it is now paid.